me say record. And we record on my computer. Amazing. So, and then the last thing I need to do before we start is to put my timer on. Okay, excellent. Hi, my name is Nadine Chahine. Thank you all for joining. We have quite a lot of people registered for today, and we have 92 in the audience. I will have to begin quite soon, can't wait too long, because there's another talk right after this one. Yeah, and hi, Joe, hi. I keep getting distracted. Anyways, I should focus on giving the talk. So, welcome to everyone. I'm really happy that you guys are here. Very happy to announce the beginning of the first Font Fashion Week, which I hope will be the first out of many to come. The point of Font Fashion Week is to come together and celebrate new typeface releases, new trends in type design, and really tell the story behind typefaces and really bring them to life. And for that, we have all these amazing foundries that are participating with us, who are part of the I Love Typography, ecosystem. So thank you for everyone. Thank you for the foundries who will be launching, and thank you for everyone attending today, for the, for showing up on this sunny afternoon to listen to me speak about mostly politics. I have to say, I was planning to spend more time talking about design, but in the end, I like to speak too much about politics. So I will be explaining more about the why we need the human in branding and type design, more than how we bring the human. There will be a little bit about that, but more about the why. And it's very topical, it's very timely. And so it's a little bit depressing as well, which is not a good way to start, which is a celebration. But we have to recognize the world we live in and react to it and plan and be sensitive to what goes on around us. So let me start by sharing my screen of what I hope will not be too depressing as a presentation. Let's see if I go next. Yes, you guys can see my presentation, I hope. Anyways, okay. So we're talking today about type design and branding in a changing world order, with a focus more on what is happening in that world rather than, like I said, the type design and the branding. And so it's really about how to react to that as designers. So this is not a purely political talk or a purely design one, it's a mesh between the two. So, and we really, to begin, we start by 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union. As you all know, the Cold War had raged for many, many decades. It was an existential crisis with the risk of nuclear war. Children in schools learned to, hide in bunkers. Ooh, no, my screen sharing is paused. Let me share again. Okay, here. So, yeah, so 1991. And basically, this is at the heart of where we are today, whether it is in the news, what happens in Ukraine, or where we are in a changing world order. After the fall of the Soviet Union, there was a euphoria in the West that the biggest existential crisis has passed, and biggest ideological debate between capitalism and communism, between democracy, liberal democracy on one side, and state-controlled communism on the other, that it had ended. And this euphoria, you can really see its manifestation first in the article that I reference here, and then in the book by roughly the same name, The End of History, by Francis Fukuyama. He's an amazing political scientist, but in that particular aspect, he was reflecting the thinking of the time, I guess. And it really was about this celebration and the happiness and the euphoria, the relief of the victory of liberal democracies, and his text has been quoted out of context in many times, and so I thought it would be good to really grab his how do you call it, definition, that this is about the passing of a particular period of post-war history, but the end of history as such, the end point of mankind's ideological evolution and the universalization of Western liberal democracy as the final form of human government. Not that there will never be events anymore, but this is the victory of liberalism. And so when we understand liberalism, we're not necessarily speaking here of liberalism as just, being progressive and equal rights and what else. This is the international relations theory of liberalism. And with that, it's underpinned by several principles. One of them is the democratic peace theory, that mature democracies do not fight one another. And so if you have a world filled with liberal democracies, there will be no more war between those democracies, because this theory says, based on studies of what had already happened in human history, and it's a very flawed theory, but still it's very big in IR theory, that there will be no more wars, basically. And so the spread of liberal democracy is supposed to, and bring about world peace, I guess, in a way, at some point. But so this was one principle. And then the other principle is that trade linkages between countries will deepen the links between them, the connections, and that it will reduce the threat of war. I'm going very quickly here through, of course, what is very expanded and elaborate political thought and theory, but just to point to the fact that based on this thinking, the more countries trade with one another, the more connections you have with one another, the less likely you are to have war. And given the victory of liberal democracy, then there is no impediment against these linkages all over the world, right? And connecting all of the countries to one another. And with that, I wanted to get to one other. Yeah, I'm missing a slide. But anyways, maybe I'll get to it later. And so that was the end of that particular moment of the end of the 90s, right? The victory of the liberal world order. And in the year 2000, Blair was one of the first leaders in the West to reach out to Putin. Then you had in 2001, other than the horrific events of September 11 and the Afghanistan war and all of those. But we have a significant milestone when China was admitted to the World Trade Organization, which really opened up world markets to China and made China what it is today. Both of these, we pay the price. Both of these events, we pay the price for them now. Reaching out to Putin as a modernizer for Russia, and then bringing China into the World Trade Organization and creating America's biggest foe, which is China at the moment. And there are many theorists who argue that basically the US and the West have made their own enemies in that sense because of this particular action in 2001. So this is the world that we were operating in 20 years ago. Putin made a state visit to the UK, so he was really being welcomed into the West. And then with the Iraq war, of course, Putin was one of the people who were on the winning side of that, given the changes in the geopolitics of the region. And so what we end up with back then is a globalized world order. It wasn't a liberal world order, really, because not everyone in it was liberal, but they were globalized. And so globalization brought about these interdependencies, both between democracies and autocracies, which is one of its weaknesses, because now we pay the price for them. And basically, there was no... it didn't matter anymore if a company was based in the US or in China or in the UK or in Japan or wherever it is. There was a divorce between the large multinational companies and the places where they are from. And so there is this divorce between time and place, and the absence of the human. In a way, and I hope I can explain this easily, so that was fun. I will not convert, so you will not have a recording of this. Anyways, okay, reclaim as host, got it. Okay. So I'm guessing people are still here. Sorry about that. I don't know why my computer quit. Not the computer, the Zoom. Let me share my screen. Okay, everyone is still here. Excellent, thank you. Let me share my screen again. Okay, I don't know when quit really. But let me recap the last thought. Okay, so basically we had gotten to a point 20 years ago where, and you know, 10 years ago, and even up to now at a certain extent, that it didn't matter where our you know, the laptops, the clothes, the furniture, it didn't matter where they are because of the complexity of trade, because the different sourcing of material, they move around the world. And you could see it in branding as well. You could see that, you know, suddenly all of the brands wanted to communicate in the same style, this neutral style, this future proofing where everything needed to be clean and perfect. And that's where you start to see the geometrics and serifs and the grotesques and what else. We lived in a world where if you go into a library in one, you know, somewhere in America or somewhere in Europe or somewhere in Asia, the books, the notebooks, the laptops, there were so many commonalities in the things we consume on a daily basis, which is not a problem in and of itself. But when it came to branding, we sort of lost that sense of time and place, where everything was the same almost in the brand, and you see the rebrands, and we have often, like, you know, there's all these memes as well of the different rebrands and how they all look the same now. And this is this divorce from the time and the place was really, at least the way I see it, it came as an echo of that triumphism of the victory of liberal democracy, that the end of history euphoria, where the whole world was going to be one big globalized network of trade and communication and openness. And in many ways, that was a good thing. But in many ways, there were seeds of discontent in it as well. And we don't have space to get into that, unfortunately. But I see parallels in between those two. And fast forward to where we are today, and we start to see the weaknesses. In 2020, with the pandemic, with COVID-19, we had the supply chain crisis around the world, where suddenly, when you depend on someone on the other side of the world and they are unable to work, then you're unable to source, and then you get the supply chain crisis that we're still currently in until the moment. You had in 2021 vaccine nationalism, which was also you know, where certain parts of the world, mostly the Western, richer parts, were able to buy vaccines, but then the poorer parts were not. The PPEs in 2020, again, you have a little bit of nationalism there, where every country is able to buy for itself, but not necessarily share with anybody else. People who are high risk in a poor nation were less likely to get a vaccine than low risk people in a rich nation, which on the face of it is not fair, but that's the reality of it. And so these are stressors, right, on our ability to be one big globalized market. And then in 2022, we see now the invasion of Ukraine, and China is watching, because there is also the risk of an invasion of Taiwan. And that will, if it happens or when it happens, would be a much bigger shock to the economic system than the Ukraine one, because of the manufacturing of semiconductor chips in Taiwan. So then we're all, you know, we'll be feeling it more than just on a humanitarian levels as well. And so what we see over here is, well, let me get to the next slide. What we are seeing here is the emergence of a multipolar world order. So in 20 years ago, with the triumph of the West, we were in a unipolar moment, a unipolar world order where the US was what we would call the hegemon. They were the biggest and basically the only superpower left. What we are seeing today is the weakening of the US because of the wars, because of the financial crisis and many other things. And we have the rise of China, and then we have the rise of Russia as well. And so we move from a unipolar to a multipolar world order. This is usually, in theory, a move from unipolar to multipolar is a violent one. But the impact, and we see it in Ukraine, and we probably see it elsewhere as well. This is the bit which is unhappy and a little bit depressing. It's not a good way to start, but yeah, stay with me. So one of the impacts that we will see, and we already start to see, is polarized globalization or hemispherical globalization. I don't even know what we're supposed to call it. There isn't a name for it yet, but basically globalization will split in half. And you will have the countries that are basically either the Western or aligned with Western democracies on the one hand, and then you will have the autocracies or aligned with autocracies on the other side. And so we can see, for example, China, India stepping in to support Russia against sanctions. So you start to see the deepening links. They were already there, but now they become more apparent. And so you will have the West on one side, you will have China, Russia, and while Modi is in power, India as well on the other side, potentially. We don't know. But we will start to see those splitting in between the ties more and more. And this is my projection. There is no one saying that this is definitely going to happen, but I see it on the cards already, and we see impacts of it. We see suddenly the discussion that we no longer should be buying, from Russia, even gas, even though we're very dependent in Europe on Russian gas. So there is that split, right? And it will happen more and more. The more this political friction will continue to exist, the more this will reflect on market friction as well, on the economy as well. And so it is not possible in a world like today to be neutral anymore. Zelensky said, when addressing the Israeli Knesset, that you cannot be neutral in the face of good and evil. We don't need to take it to that extent, because there are many parallels already in place. You see it in the US market, you see it even over here as well, where companies, brands, just go back to branding, are being asked by their consumers to declare who they are and what they stand for on cultural and political issues. So the question of being neutral starts to become less and less possible for the brands of today. There is a blurring of the politics and the market. There is a blurring of the role of a brand. A company that makes burgers shouldn't have to, in a typical scenario, to say where on the gender discussion it will fall, or the rights of LGBTQ, or on the questions of abortions, or those cultural issues that are breaking points within American culture today. But they will have to declare, and they are already declaring. But it's the same on an even bigger scale and with bigger impact when it comes to war, like in Russia and Ukraine and the invasion of Ukraine, where companies are asked and pressured by their consumers, like, get out of Russia, we do not want you to sell in Russia. And so again, that blurring of the politics and the brands will not be able to be neutral in the face of such big existential crises as we are facing today. And so then we return to the time and the place because of the absence of the neutral. Because we can no longer be neutral. That time of neutrality where any company based anywhere could look the same and market everywhere, those days have passed. The times when a company could talk to its consumers and not recognize that they are going through a historic difficulty because of the pandemic, those times have passed as well. We cannot, as brands, talk to the consumer as consumer anymore. We have to talk to them as people. We have to recognize how they feel and what they are going through, and the humanity of the suffering or the challenges or the opportunities or the pressures. It's a very difficult period for many, many people at the moment, some more than others. And so in such a context, we have to be sensitive to that human element. We cannot stay on the side and be neutral. We have to connect as people. And brands will have to recognize that. And this is at the crux of it. This is why we need to speak to people as people, not simply as consumers who will spend money, right? This is at the heart of it. And so now we go to in the last few minutes to type design. And where do we see the human in typefaces? Where do we feel that impact? I've made a selection, and I've talked a little bit about this in an article that I've published on the site. But basically, this is Pembroke by Jeremy Tankard. And this is one example where I see a branding typeface that still remains that human touch. And it's very difficult to quantify. So I've just picked a few typefaces, and I've picked one characteristic that I see that could be representative. So in the case of Pembroke, it's the hint of the pen movement, because when we think of geometric sans serifs and when we think of the grotesques, it's almost like the curve has been ironed, and we have lost those kinks of pen movement, those imperfections, and the hint that the human is behind this movement. This mechanical aspect to the drawing, when taken to the extreme, results in a little bit of coldness. But then when you bring back those pen movements, when you bring back references to that movement, as you can see, for example, in the top of the A, that speed with which this is curving down, this little nib over here, which comes more from a serif reference than from a sans serif one. But these, you know, they are little gestures that when they combine with one another, they give you a different type of tonality. So when you look at the typeface, you feel that it has a soul. You still feel the warmth that it has. Another typeface is Code Next. And this is a paradox, because Code Next is a geometric sans serif. For all intents and purposes, this is what I'm saying there is no time for, because I'm saying that the geometric sans serifs and the grotesque, the neutrality of them, it's no longer fit for purpose for many. It's not as safe as an option anymore. I think that would be a better way of saying it. That we still need to use them, obviously, for certain cases, but there is demand for something else. But funnily enough, there is this geometric sans serif, which I think works quite well, and it's still somehow like it's a bit of magic of it. And this is how amazing type design is, that you look in the details and there is something in it that gives you a sense of warmth. I don't know, it's the proportion, it's the width of it, it's quite wide, it's quite generously proportioned. It's very, very open. It could be the little curves at the edges in some places, but there is that sense of warmth in it, that you see it and it feels like this is a typeface you can spend time with. And again, this is something that is a desirable quality. At least this is how I would see it. This one, Antarctican, I can only say je ne sais quoi. I don't know. I don't know why this typeface feels warm. I don't know why this does not feel cold. I don't know why it feels like as a typeface you can spend time with and you can relate to, and there is that sense of warmth. I don't really see a lot of pen movement in it. I really don't know, but when I look at it, something, especially when I'm looking here, and of course the color is helping, obviously, that yellow, but there is something in it that is charming and that feels open, even though the characters are so closed, you know, especially in that bold way. So again, I'm mystified. I really don't know. I could have taken it out and just not shown it, but sometimes it's good to say, I don't know why this feels good. In this case, for example, in Berliner Sands, again, we see a little bit of element of reference to pen movement, and it's little details like what I call the phantom triangles, which you will see over here at the top of the, you know, the letters M and H, the P as well, the R, those little triangles, because this little nib over here reminds a little bit of how you would have written it if it were a serif typeface, or if you were writing it actually by hand, and so, or with nib. So these phantom triangles, they sort of break that monotony, break that rigidity of what a sans serif could look like, and this is, yeah, quite charming. American also, and I will have to rush because I have to go open the next talk, which is really poor planning from me. I should have given myself more time for this. But yeah, again, lots of pen movement over here. You can see a little bit of quirks here and here, and look at this G. No, there is movement, and this is really, again, the movement reminds of the human who is behind this typeface, and it's when we bring those qualities in that suddenly typefaces are no longer bland or passepartout or like out of reference to where they came from. For example, this typeface for me is Barcelona. Like, I'm currently living in Barcelona. I see the typeface. The designers live in Barcelona as well. The foundry is in Barcelona. And I see it and I write Barcelona and I feel that connection with the place and the time as well. And this is where typefaces can speak and can have evocative power. And this is just amazing. And this is what we really need to reach out for in this world of you know, more war and more hassle and more craziness that we live in. There is this typeface as well, Tas, from Lucas Fonts, and this is about the energy. I mean, look at the, you know, the movement, the angles, the beauty of the curves. Again, this doesn't feel that it was mechanically generated. This feels that someone was behind this and made these decisions with full intent and purpose. And then finally, Pandera. And this one, this is from the Lazy Dog Foundry, and it just for me feels like comfort and would be perfect, by the way, for IKEA, given the colors, and also quite nice reference to Ukraine colors as well. But there is something really nice about this extended, you know, design, and with these types of interventions over here, and the typeface gives that sense of comfort. And so let me stop sharing for just the final moment, and I speak, put my video on. Yeah, hi. Yeah, so I will save your questions if there are any questions. Yes, some people are still asking. Okay, someone saying thank you. Okay, cool, good. We can carry on the conversation online. You can tweet at us on I Love Typography and I will reply, or at Arabic Type, I will also reply. And I will post the link to the article that shows all the typefaces, and I will post some of the presentation slides as well, and maybe do a wrap up. We couldn't record the thing because Zoom died, and so maybe Facebook is still on, in which case we do have a recording. So let's see. But anyways, thank you all for coming here today. I hope this was interesting, and thank you so much. I will. How do I save all of save the chat? Okay, let me see. No, I want to save the chat because I really want to read what, yeah, done. Okay, excellent, good. So yeah, thank you so much. And I see you soon, and come to the other talks, okay? Cool, okay, bye. Bye.